Hello and welcome to the December 20th edition of the Gold Goats Gun Short News. My name is Tom Luongo. We've got a lot to talk about, and today I want to talk about the pullout in Syria. I talked about it yesterday, and with the initial announcement from Donald Trump, which was welcomed. I've given Trump a lot of shit recently, and I'll be happy to continue to give him more shit if he doesn't follow through with this, because the announced pullout in Syria is very important. It's a big win if he pulls it off. And if he pulls it off, golf claps all around, man. Very happy about that. Still think Trump is an amoral windbag. Still think he's completely weak on so many other issues and in so many other vectors. But here he finally stood up and went, am I president or am I not president? Am I commander-in-chief of the armed forces or not? Do you guys respect the chain of command, or are we going to have a military coup? This is something that can't be argued with. And I'll give him credit for this, because as of Sunday or even Monday, it didn't look like that. It looked like he was just rolling over and playing dead. Okay, so now let's talk about this. Moon of Alabama's got a great post up going over a lot of the ins and outs relative to Turkey and the Kurds and all of that stuff. I'm going to summarize some of what Bernard said and add my own spin on it as well. Now, listen, the plan to balkanize Syria has always been a bad one. And it's one that I've written about a year and a half, 2 years ago, saying, look, it's not going to work. We're going to try. We're going to continue to hope that we can make it work this way and make it look like we're going to have a permanent position in Syria. But the truth of the matter is that it was never a tenable position. I'm not the only one saying it. The guys at Durand have been saying this. The guys at I've seen this. The guys over Strategic Culture, they've all been saying the same things for a long time now, which is that ultimately Russia, Iran, China, and Turkey, once Turkey got off the bandwagon, were playing for time. They could always play a war of attrition against the United States. And even when I said that I thought that Trump ceded foreign policy to the neocons in order to stay in power back in middle of 2017, I said the best we can hope for here is that he's going to allow them to just enough rope to hang themselves, right? And that the policies will eventually destroy themselves and reveal themselves to be untenable, and then he'll just finally, be able to come in and put his foot down. But I was expecting him to be in a much stronger position politically after the midterm elections. What he's done, which is interesting, and again, all of this is very preliminary. Vladimir Putin said yesterday, I haven't seen any reality here. I haven't seen any moves here made by the Americans to actually pull troops out yet. So until people start leaving, until stuff starts actually happening, and not just reports in the press, we still remain skeptical. But so far, so good. So even as of September of last year, it became really obvious that the Kurds east of the Euphrates River, the YPG Kurds, knew that their position as in opposition to Assad was a tenuous one. And it would only depend upon the commitment of the Americans to stay there and shield them. But even then, there was plenty of communication through back channels between the Kurds and Assad about an eventual détente. And Assad offered them near full autonomy within the state of Syria last year, which the Kurds rejected. Again, I talked about this. Bernard over at Moon of Alabama and others talked about it as well, saying, you guys are going to lose here. The Americans are eventually going to have to betray you. But they never learn. So ignore the outcry today that you'll see on Twitter and in the headlines and the Western press, and certainly coming out of places like the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post and whatnot, about the plight of the Kurds. It's all nonsense. They made their bed. They're lying in it. When Barzani's revolt in Iraq failed earlier in the year, we sponsored them to have an election. They voted to secede, and then Barzani's Peshmerga forces got wiped out at Erbil. Didn't matter. So now they're done. So the possibility of a greater Kurdistan, which is the wet dream of the Bolton, Pompeo, Mattis, Dunford wing of the Trump administration, it was over then, and it was just a matter of waiting for the fat lady to sing, or in this case, the Orange Jesus to sing. So good on Trump for doing this. Good on Trump for finally acceding to reality and seeing a moment where he can get the most political capital out of this. Now, the truth of the matter is that he only has himself to blame for having to go this route, for having lost so many battles between Helsinki and today. But whatever. If this is what he's got to do to try and shake things up in Washington, great. We'll take it. All over it. Because if he doesn't start to pull back, as I said previously, he doesn't start to pull back on this insane Bolton, Pompeo, great power strategy, coupled with rampant mercantilism and a weaponization of the dollar, then he will, in the end, be worse than Hillary Clinton. Because he'll have been the guy who was supposed to be the reformer who ultimately did exactly what she would have done. So, as of today, he's not. We'll see where we are in 30 days. Because there's a lot that can happen between now and the time those forces actually leave Syria. Nancy Pelosi's insane Democrats will be taking control of the House of Representatives. There's going to be a lot of pushback within the GOP. We've already got letters of outrage from Lindsey Graham and Tom Cotton and the rest of them in the GOP. We've got a whole bunch of problems. There's a lot of minefields that have to be traversed here in order to actually get these just supposedly 2,000 troops out of Syria. There's really closer to 5,000, but let's not kid ourselves. So what I find interesting here, so the Kurds are going to have to come to the table at the Astana peace talks, and they're going to get a much worse deal today than they would have gotten a year ago had they effectively negotiated then against the will of the United States and Israel and the Saudis. And Turkey remains in the driver's seat. I have an article at Strategic Culture this morning, or yesterday, talked about this yesterday. Russia and Turkey were the ones pushing for an end to the conflict in Syria, and I was absolutely right about this. Trump finally acceded to the reality that Erdogan was not going to allow, President Erdogan of Turkey was not going to allow a Kurdish statelet between Turkey and Syria had access to the Mediterranean in order to market their oil. That was not going to happen without significant pushback from the Turks. It just wasn't going to happen. It was a dumb idea from the beginning. It was predicated on insane arrogance on the part of the neoconservative laptop bombardiers on K Street and the guys within the DOD, the generals in the DOD. It was insane. The whole thing was nuts. So Turkey remains in the driver's seat here. As a matter of fact, they're in a very good position to get what they want from both the United States and Russia going forward. So they're going to get access to cheap Russian energy and Iranian energy. They'll probably get all the sanctions exemptions they ever ask for, or ever want. A lot of this comes down, again, as I said yesterday, about Erdogan playing the war for the White House against everyone by vis-a-vis the Khashoggi killing, by drip feeding out all of the information about the Khashoggi killing. Erdogan played both sides of the deep state war on Capitol Hill against each other to get what he wanted. It's a beautiful piece of political kit on his part. And I've always said that Erdogan's an amazingly good politician, an amazingly good strategic fighter and tactician. If he hadn't saw from the beginning that he was going to be made the scapegoat for the entire Syrian affair, if it fell apart right after the Russians invaded, Russians intervened in September of 2015, if he didn't realize then that he was being made into the scapegoat, he would have been deposed in July of 2016, and the landscape would look completely different today. So I'm not crazy about it again, but I'm just telling you what I see. So we're going to watch the rest of this is going to now come down to the Astana political process, which has took a major step forward over the weekend. And it looks like the next phase of this is going to be when Trump and Kushner unveiled their peace plan, which I think is DOA at this point. Israelis don't like it. Hezbollah doesn't like it. Hamas doesn't like it. No one likes it. But with the United States pulling out of Syria, it changes the calculus as of today. So, because, again, as I said, I reminded you yesterday, Iran has agreed to move what forces they have in Syria, which aren't many, back 100 kilometers from the contact line, Golan Heights. And so everybody's going to get a little of what they want, and Bolton and Pompeo are going to get none of what they want ultimately with this, because they were arguing, of course, for conditions that were unmeetable, and then use those unattainable goals and unattainable demands as reasons for why the U.S. gets to act in a unilateral manner. So it's much the same way that Bolton has argued for dissolving the INF treaty with Russia. Okay, it's the way of the world, and on that front, Trump is also insane and absolutely needs to stop thinking about leverage. And as always, that's all he can think about. You can only think in terms of transactions and leverage. Putin talked about this at his 3-hour press conference yesterday. It makes, or no, not Putin. An interview with Sergei Lavrov I read this morning, the Russian foreign minister, kept making the point that the U.S. keeps thinking in terms of the next transaction in international affairs. Certainly this administration does. And they're not thinking strategically. They're only thinking tactically. And they can make some short-term wins, but they're going to lose the longer-term war, which is exactly what I've been saying for a long time, which is that you can't put pressure on people by weaponizing the dollar and then expect them to continue to use dollars 3 years from now to the same degree that they did before. You're going to raise the cost of using dollars to the point where they're going to go look for search for alternatives. The dollar gained dominance in trade and as the world's reserve currency because of our stable politics, because we never defaulted on it, because we didn't abuse people for using it. Ultimately, the solidity of it, relatively speaking, certainly in these 40 years, relatively speaking, has been the reason why it's in the position that it's in today. And so much of what Trump has done since he's been in office is, whether that's by design or because he's economically illiterate, at this point, who can say? Me? When a man thinks that a trade deficit is stealing, I got to think he's economically illiterate. But that's for a talk for a different day. For now, we'll take the win. Merry Christmas from Syria. This has been the Gold Ghosts and Guns short news for December 20th, 2018. If you like what you heard today, please give a like and subscribe down below. That'd be great. For those of you who couldn't stand me pissing off about Donald Trump over the last few weeks, unsubscribe. I really don't want to listen to you anymore. And you guys have a great afternoon. And if we don't talk between now and Christmas, enjoy your holiday. Tomorrow night, 8:30, live stream here on YouTube. You guys take care. Keep your stick on the ice.